Over the past 3 years, Bureau van Dijk has done a series of compliance webinars where we've made predictions of what would happen in the industry, specifically with FIs and corporations as they respond to regulations. Today I'm speaking with Keith Furst and Bill Hauserman about our webinar that we did in October of 2017, and to discuss what's happened in the industry over the last 3 months since that webinar. Now, Bill, you had mentioned that corporates are under pressure to reduce the cost of compliance and that it's getting more and more difficult for them to actually justify hiring more staff to handle data discovery, alert review processes, and other manual compliance tasks. How have these pressures evolved over the last 12 months, and how did you see companies responding?
So one of the most interesting trends we've saw, and very shortly after our webinar last year, was the culmination of the regulatory pressure on the operational outcomes within KYC and other forms of due diligence. So with regulators putting more pressure on, we started to see it as part of the audit reviews. So outside audit comes in, they started to look at these problems of sanctions not being aligned, no one dealing with things like OFAC 50% ownership issues and exposure. So first the regulators came in, and really the pressure was on, and we started to see that as early as Q1. We definitely saw it through Q2, and as we now are exiting 2018, we're seeing corporations and banks. Banks were there first, but corporations as well starting to really focus on this issue. And it's the problem is you don't just change a process like that. It's too fundamental to the business today, and it's 85% of most KYC is done by people. 85%, the rest being data and technology. That's the cost drivers. And we're talking $12 billion in 16 was spent on this. So I think that's where it's more about using smarter the technology and the data being paramount, to make the people more effective. That in and of itself will drive down costs.
Keith, you had actually described data as being the new oil, and you warned about the increasing volume of unstructured data and the impact of that on risk and compliance. So what exactly are the challenges posed by the volume of unstructured data in the near future, and what potential do you see for unstructured data to improve KYC, AML, and onboarding processes?
Right, so the challenges with unstructured data is that it's unstructured, and some compliance, how do I make sense of it? It's a bit overwhelming. However, there's tremendous potential, and one way to extract meaning or significance or risk indicators from unstructured data is to use structured data. For example, Orbis has, as you know, been cleaned, and it's a structured data set using compliance that's been enhanced over the years, right? So this information, and it has relevance to compliance for beneficial ownership and many other reasons, but essentially when you can take that structured data and use it as a filter or as a reference point for the artificial intelligence algorithms that are coming out and different reg tech, you're able to go to unstructured data and train it to find things that are relevant to compliance. So there's a lot of potential, and one big unstructured data set that you can think of, obviously, is negative news, right? And so by using that structured data to teach it, and then the advanced algorithms, and also input from the analysts, the risk decision that they make is very important. And all of that is going to come together and make compliance more accurate, or discovering risk more efficient.
Bill, you had also predicted that within the next 3 to 5 years, we could expect to see a dramatic reduction in the amount of manual checking as processes become more automated. What are the implications of that, both for companies and for compliance teams? Can we expect to see a cost reduction to compliance? And are there any other ways companies might benefit from automating their processes?
Well, the automation certainly is going to create efficiency. Efficiency creates cost containment, But what it's really, the first priority is to make the programs more inclusive. Today, many of the due diligence programs focused on clients, focused on supply chain, focused on distribution channel. They're all about being able to take or project the riskiest relationships and then apply due diligence and, more importantly, the entire monitoring process to them. That has to change. There has to be inclusion of the entire relationship set. So that's all the clients, all the distributors, and all of the suppliers. That is really what automation is allowing to happen. So the cost reductions will happen, particularly as technologies we'll talk about in a bit come into play. But automation is allowing companies to finally take the entire population of external relationship, partner relationship, client relationship, et cetera, and put them into a sophisticated due diligence program and, more importantly, monitor them on a daily basis.
Keith, you had suggested that compliance teams will need to expand their skill sets to ensure they remain relevant as processes become more automated. What are the skills compliance staff will need to have looking forward over the next 12 to 18 months?
Right. So generally when you think about compliance analysts or risk analysts, they've been trained to assess risk on a limited data set, and generally there's a score or some sort of indication from the system that this is the risk level. Now, with RegTech, which involves a number of different technologies, which we're going to go into, essentially it's introducing more data, and it's also getting at more potential risk indicators. And it's data that they haven't seen traditionally. So what's actually happening is that they need to reskill, as Bill alluded to, in the sense of they need to interpret a wide array of data that they may not have seen in the past and then make a risk decision on it because of the technology that's being deployed in compliance today.
Speaking of artificial intelligence, Bill, you had predicted that teaching AI to manage the quantity of unstructured data will be one of the challenges of the next couple of years. To what extent do compliance teams have the necessary skills to cope with that? And are there areas where they could still improve?
There will be pressures on compliance teams to understand what they can and can't do, and then to upskill, as Keith was saying. But I'd say that they're going to have the technical support from the data scientist team, from the artificial intelligence team, to create the environments. What the artificial intelligence, machine learning can't do is make the proper decisions. Only humans can do that. That's going to require the change at the compliance professional level, where instead of gathering information and assessing risk, they're going to have to determine risk from, as Keith mentioned, vast amount of information that they actually never had before. So that process is, to me, the complex one. Sure, artificial intelligence, machine learning, the neural networks, that's really high tech, but that is in place in many instances, and we're simply trying to make it affordable. The goal for compliance is to reset the skills so that the output from that is usable both in determining risk today, but in also teaching those algorithms, those AI algorithms, how to better themselves over time. The potential here is tremendous.
So one last question to the both of you before we wrap up. Customer onboarding is a primary focus for Bureau van Dijk as we head into 2019. And AI research tools are being developed for adverse media, and we are implementing robotic process automation to our compliance catalyst tool to deal with alerts faster. So how do you expect KYC, AML, and customer onboarding to change in 2019 and 2020?
The way I see it, I think it's when you look at customer onboarding, Bill mentioned this earlier, but there is the operational aspect. And then obviously the KYC aspect, usually it came later, but it's almost blending together and it's coming earlier now. I think we also mentioned this in the webinar. But what I see when you look at this life cycle, as robotic process automation comes out, as you introduce AI and more data, what it's actually doing, it's transforming it in different ways. And one is, we mentioned this a little earlier, but robotic process automation, you have a repetitive task. If you have a robot that can go out, you click a button and it does it like a human would do it, it frees up that time. So One effect of this, again, is the human analyst needs to be more strategic. They're going to be making more intellectual decisions rather than actually clicking a button, because they're going to have, let's say, a team of robots actually at their disposal to do more work. And then as you introduce AI, the really interesting thing about this, as I alluded to earlier, you have more data come in, robotic process automation, and then you actually have a decision from a compliance analyst that gets fed back in to the AI so it could learn and make better predictions for compliance about where the risk is. So it's this whole interaction that's very exciting. It's a very exciting time in compliance and in risk. And I think it's going to uncover a lot of risk, and it's going to be, as Bill said, a revenue driver. So it's a good time to be in compliance.
Just since that webinar, that's a year, the term client lifecycle management has come in. And that's a discipline. So it's a process, but it's a discipline. And the discipline is that if you can make clients happier, stickier, they will generate more revenue. So take the minutia out of banking. Take the minutia out of signing up a new client if you're a corporation. If you make that client happier and your competitor isn't, that's a revenue opportunity. So that's a growth opportunity. Simultaneously, the reg tech has been all about the process implementation that essentially embeds the compliance needs, the risk detection and risk remediation. If you can do those two things, the board of directors is happy, because now they don't feel they're just investing in a cost due diligence. They're actually investing in both growth, because of the happier client set, and risk reduction, and thus compliance, and the auditors and the regulators are much happier overall. So I think that's what Bureau van Dijk is focused on, and as part of Moody's Analytics, there's lots of tools to make that client experience and the compliance element of that experience intersect and essentially be one for a true win-win.
It's exciting times that we have going on right now, and it'll be even more exciting to catch up with you again, say at the end of 2019 or beginning of 2020. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.